Hi, I'm Scott Allen Cambo, and today I'd like to talk to you about my research on model positionality and computational reflexivity, and how we can use this to promote reflexivity in data science. In this paper, we describe the importance of reflexivity in data science, some of the challenges it presents, and some conceptual and computational solutions for overcoming these challenges. First, let me just give a brief, high-level description of positionality and reflexivity. Imagine two of the first astronomers in very different parts of the world. One believes that the stars were put there by the gods. The other believes that the stars tell a story about what will happen on Earth. Not only are these two astronomers each observing different aspects of the same sky, their approach to reasoning about that data is also very different. For each of them to learn from the other's findings while recognizing the circumstances that influence their findings, they will need to reason about their position in the world and how this influences the way they approach their work. They can do this by being intentional with what they do and don't look for in the sky, or how they make sense of what they see in the sky. This is called positionality, or the position a researcher has chosen to adopt within the research study. Reflexivity is the process by which we attempt to understand our positionality and how it helped us construct and impose meaning in our research process. Modern data scientists are in a similar position to early astronomers. Our training and backgrounds are very diverse, so we can't assume that we share epistemological beliefs with each other, and this influences what we measure, what we see, and what we choose to convey with our work. Furthermore, these models are a product of and extension of these beliefs. As such, when we build models that are deployed into global socio-technical systems like social media platforms, search engines, or recommender systems, they are confronted with the limits of how well these beliefs extend to other cultures and communities. These models are the culmination of many decisions that the data scientists made, as well as the many decisions made by others in the world that produced the data. For example, the two most consequential decisions in building a model may be the machine learning algorithm we use to build it and the data that the algorithm is going to learn from. Given this, we might say that a model is simply an extension of the data scientist's decision, and so understanding the data scientist's positionality should be sufficient. However, there are two issues that complicate this. First, learning algorithms embody assumptions about the way that the world works. As such, these assumptions create some inferential bias, and this bias creates a tendency towards certain decisions that don't inherently reflect the data scientist's position. Second, the most common type of machine learning is supervised machine learning, which means that the data has to be labeled by someone. Often, this means using a crowd annotation platform like Amazon's Mechanical Turk or Figure 8, where we can find thousands of people to contribute labels to our dataset. These crowd annotators are coming from all over the world with all sorts of different positionalities that each influence the final labels for our dataset and thus the final model produced in our data science project. Given the extent to which social, cultural, and political context can influence the decisions that a model makes, we felt the need to consider this as model positionality. Of course, we can't simply ask a model to reflect on its position in the world, so we need to explore methods for allowing the data scientist to reflect on model positionality in context with other positionalities, such as those of the crowd annotators and the data scientist themselves. We call this computational reflexivity, or the set of computational methods and ways of thinking that facilitate reflexivity in data science. Computational reflexivity can complement reflexive practices that have been established in social science by aiding the goals of self-awareness, self-reflection, and transparency in the context of large data sets. I'll briefly describe some of the methods that we contribute to computational reflexivity in our paper. The first technique we propose is called annotator fingerprinting. The idea behind this is that we can reflect on positionality by comparing and contrasting how different entities would annotate the data under different conditions. Here, we make the assumption that annotators with similar positionalities will provide similar labels to similar data. In essence, an annotator fingerprint is a two-dimensional matrix in which the annotator's label is represented in the columns and the context in which the label was applied is represented in the rows. Representing labels in this format is straightforward when the labels are discrete, but representing context requires a sense of what some of the broad but meaningful contexts are within the dataset. To achieve this, we need to use some kind of data reduction or compression method to collapse specific data points into broader contexts. In our paper, we use a topic model vector in a text classification task to help us understand which topics frequently received which labels from a particular annotator. One of the cool features of annotator fingerprints is that we can compare them in lots of helpful ways. By simply calculating the difference between the two matrices, we can better understand the contexts in which these annotators disagree with each other. We can also reshape these matrices into one-dimensional vectors and use a vector similarity metric like cosine similarity or Euclidean similarity for further analyses. The second contribution we make to computational reflexivity is position mining, which is a set of techniques to identify groups of annotators who apply similar annotations to similar items in a corpus or dataset. In our paper, we coined the term position mining as a method for computational reflexivity which helps us see these broader positions in a way that aids our reflexive work, but also in a way that might help us identify biases in the label aggregation process. After all, if there are two major positions toward the concept that we are labeling for, then which one does the aggregated label represent best? If there are other positions, what contexts will present the most misalignment? The approach that we take to position mining is quite simple. We first collapse the annotator fingerprint into a 1D vector, then we apply a clustering algorithm with an appropriate similarity function. We encourage all to explore other potential solutions as well. To demonstrate these techniques and how they can help reflexivity in data science, we applied them to the task of developing content moderation algorithms using the Wikipedia toxic comment classification dataset. We use this dataset for a few reasons. One, toxic behaviors are highly subjective because we don't all agree on what should or should not be said. Two, this dataset also has a unique annotator IDs, which allow us to differentiate which annotations came from which annotators. 3, the dataset also includes demographic information regarding gender, age, educational background, and whether English is their first language. This information aids our reflexivity by helping us understand which attributes are shared when annotators have similar annotator fingerprints. Our approach to reflexivity in this work looks like the following. First, we compute annotator fingerprints for all annotators. Second, we use position mining techniques to derive common positions. Third, we use the differences in these common positions to sample data that represents the full spectrum from most to least controversial. Fourth, we personally annotate this sample to understand how we fit into this spectrum of controversy. And finally, we visualize the fingerprints using a dimensionality reduction technique such as UMAP or t-SNE to project each fingerprint to a 2D plot. What we get is something that looks like this. A visual representation of my position in the broad socio-technical context of the Wikipedia toxic comment classification dataset. We can see two primary positions in our data, one presented in red and the other represented in blue. I can now see where I am in respect to these two major positions and use this as an entry point for further reflexive work. In our paper, I discuss some of the things I learned about myself, our data, and the challenges with the concept of toxic comments in more detail. I also trained a variety of logistic regression methods with different models with different regularization parameters and training data from one cluster, the other, or both. Most of the models had nearly negligible differences in terms of test accuracy on a held-out dataset, but we can see that the fingerprints, based on their predictions, have a lot of variability in which annotators they align best with when it comes to predictions. For more on this, please read our paper and check out our talk at CHI 2022. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and further engaging with all of your diverse positions in HCI research. Thank you.